to our shop just outside Kennesaw here in North Georgia. Well, guys and girls, we did it. We were up over 500 subscribers on this little channel in our little corner of YouTube, and I can't tell you how much that means to me. Again, my channel's not monetized. I don't have a Patreon account. I don't sell t-shirts. I just do this really to share knowledge, and it's been a real rewarding trip for me, because not only have I shared knowledge on the channel, I've been able to give some advice over email and through comments, and heck, this community has some talented people in it, and I've learned a few things from some others' ways of doing things a little bit better. So I appreciate that. So we'll keep going. If there's any type of video that you like better than others, you know, put a comment down below and give me an idea. I don't want to get it to the point where all I'm doing is showing a video of me stripping a piece of furniture and then refinishing it. There's particular things that you're interested in. If I get the opportunity to show those with a piece that comes through the shop, I'm happy to do it. I know the Singer sewing machine videos are the most popular, and I've had a lot of people asking me to do work for them where they wanted to actually ship stuff to me. But I've referred them to local craftsmen because the shipping costs are just so high, and if something doesn't come out right or something's damaged in return shipping, I'm too far to make it right for them, and it's just not fair. So I'm happy to give you advice, but I'm usually going to refer you to a local craftsman to do it. And if you get stuck, I'll try to do something for you. But again, I don't want anybody disappointed in any work that comes out of my shop, and it's much easier for me to keep control of that if I'm working locally. So anyways, in celebration of our 500 subscribers, I've had numerous requests for a shop tour, and this is probably a pretty good time to do it because I've had some changes here in the shop, and I'll show you that in just a minute. And it's probably as clean as it's been in a while, which isn't really clean, but I've been working pretty hard on getting it spruced up a little bit. So what we'll do is I'll take you outside, show you the outside of the building, and then we'll come through and we'll do a section at a time, and I'll sort of explain what's here and how I got it and what I use it for. I think that's important, particularly for young guys that are trying to get started and may think that they're going to have to go out and spend $5,000 or $10,000 on equipment before they can get started. You don't have to do that, and I'll share with you where I got my stuff. Maybe that'll give you some ideas where you can get yours. So let's go outside. Well, here's the shop from outside and from the back. It's basically a 20 by 20 detached garage with some attic space up above it. And we're very, very fortunate to have this on our piece of property at our home, and we've really put it to good use. And here's the side door. That's the door that I use. And here comes Abigail. Abigail's our German Shepherd. She's 8 now. She's almost 9. This kind of gets into what we're going to talk about here in just a little bit. These are some acquisitions from this weekend. I have $10 into everything. $5 into this vertical belt sander / grinder, and $5 into those pipe clamps. The vertical belt sander is a Foley bell saw from probably 1980. It is absolutely filthy and it needs to be cleaned, but it works. And I've got some belts on order. They're 44-inch long belts, and this is going to be hugely useful in the shop. Eventually it's going to need a new belt, but the belt will be fine for now. So for $5 plus the cost of the belts, I'm in business. $5, guys, that's all it was. And then over here, make sure you can see them, are a set of B&O pipe clamps. B&O is Briggs & Cotton, I believe. But anyways, it's a USA made pipe clamp. Now I prefer my clamps in black iron, not galvanized. But for $2.50, all they need to be is cleaned up. The one's got some peel and paint. I'll grind that off and we'll get these lubricated, and these will be ready to use in the shop. So now you're looking at two pipe clamps for $5. You don't have to go out and drop $30 on a pipe clamp. Let's go inside and look at the shop. And just inside the front door to the right as I walk in is this bench. This is a traditional woodworker's bench. It has the equivalent of 3 vices on it and bench dogs. The story on this is I ran into a very, very talented woodworker in central New York when I lived up there. And he had built this for himself. I think he was doing pattern making on it or something. And he was no longer doing that kind of work and he wanted to sell it. And we started to chat and became friends. He brought me in his home and began to show me some of the things that he had made, just staircases and furniture. I mean, it was just breathtaking, the talent that this man had. And I consider myself very lucky to have acquired this bench that he built. I'll step over here and kind of show you. We've got a vise on this side that you can pin work in here and pin work in here, and it also has bench dogs that'll hold work laterally. And there's another vise here that I'm not using right now for anything other than to clamp this lamp and magnifying glass assembly down. And then we have our gigantic machinist vise attached to the bench, as you know. And then let's go through what we have on the bench up close. I'm trying very hard not to hand carry the camera any longer. I know it gives some of you all vertigo. This little set of bins I picked up at a yard sale for $5, and I keep pencils in there, marking pens, wax for doing drawer slides, and then bins of old screws as I disassemble pieces that can't be repaired or whatever. I save all the old screws, so I've got the older Phillips heads there and older straight screws there. I've also got another collection of older screws in another part of the shop. And then up above it, just some decorative stuff. Here, y'all ought to get a kick out of this. Hang on. I found this at a Goodwill. It's an autographed picture of Norm Abram. And Norm was the guy that I used to watch quite a bit when I was a much younger man. Got me interested in woodworking. I think he did a great job. I think the entire This Old House series has been magnificent. But anyways, let me put this up against the door. Many years ago, it would have been 1987, Norm Abrams was doing a tour for then Hechinger's Home Improvement, and I met him up in Syracuse, New York. That's me on the right-hand side as a much, much younger man. There's a story behind the long hair that I won't get into, but I've kept this picture, and I usually just stick it right in here in this frame, and it's just a reminder of how things were a long time ago for me. Right here I have a bunch of things for measuring screws, measuring bolts. This is a center finder for dowels, things like that. This piece here was on one of the first solid walnut pieces that I redid long before the channel. I just kept it. Somebody had put it on, but I think it's solid brass. And above the bench now, I've got 3 Japanese pull saws, which I use quite a bit. And then, because my eyes are getting old, light is very important for me, so I have a bunch of lights on this bench. But there's some of my bench planes that I've restored, and again, I buy these for $3 to $5 a piece. They're rusted usually. Take them apart, clean them up, sharpen the plane irons, put them back together, and use them. There's my block plane, my Timbermate wood filler, which I really like. And then I found these bottles to be very useful. What I put in them are solutions that I use frequently. For example, this is lacquer retarder, this is lacquer thinner, this is mineral spirits. So when I have a little small need for one of these things, I don't have to drag out the whole gallon container. These are trans tint dyes that I use. Here's a collection of C-clamps. I have many, many more in drawers. I buy these at yard sales for $1. That set of Stanley bench vices, I think I paid $1 for them. I hung them up, used them quite a bit. And then here's just some miscellaneous hardware and a can that I use for whatever, and my beeswax polish, my glue, some cedar oil, which is great if you have a cedar chest, a cedar closet that you want to get a little bit of nice cedar smell from. Usually if you sand them, they'll come right back, but if you don't, you can use the cedar oil. And then here's some clear scratch cover. And then I have an attraction for some reason to Pyrex measuring cups. As you can probably see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them here. I use them for all sorts of stuff. And again, we find these for 50 cents. This one actually was free this weekend. This is some oil that I use. I've got a smaller one right there. That's got light machine oil in it, depending on what project I need it for. And then here are a bunch of clamps. This whole group of clamps, I think I bought for $20 at Home Depot. They were on sale. These are wonderful. I use these to death, and they're Bessie's. I can't stand cheap clamps, but they're great. And I just kind of threw together this little clamp rack one day. I had nothing to do, and it's worked out well for me. And there's some more of the similar F-style clamps. And then, as I said, I've got my different lights. I've got 2 different lights on the bench. I've got this one here that I use. I'll clamp that inside of a cabinet if I'm working on it. And then I've got a mechanic's trouble light that I'll drop down if I need a lot of light. Again, here's my gigantic vise, and let's move over to the next table. I want to put you back on the stand so that I'm not making everybody dizzy. Okay, this is a stainless steel table on wheels. It's probably came out of a commercial kitchen. I bought it at a yard sale for $20 many years ago, and I've turned it into a stationary workbench. Underneath it I store paint and thinners and solvents, and on top of it I have another light, adjustable light, and then I have a hot plate and a covered saucepan, and that's not for cooking out here. That's for heating up water if I need oxalic acid or something to be dissolved in warm water. That collection of screwdrivers and Torx drivers and Torx bits is something I picked up at Ace Hardware for $19. It's not the highest quality stuff, but it's one of those deals where if you need one, it's going to save you. And then let's look a little bit to the left of this, and you can see there's some dive weights. Those are lead dive weights I picked up at a yard sale for next to nothing. I use those to weight down veneer repairs in the middle of a field and for 100 other uses. And mounted to this bench with just some C-clamps is a Reed Manufacturing vise. I estimate it's quite old. I initially thought it may be from the turn of the century, but it could be from later. But this, when I bought it, was rusted shut. I paid $5 for it, took it home, cleaned it up, and took it apart and oiled it. And this action on this vise is just incredibly smooth. I love this vise. You give it a spin and it goes like silk. That's probably my favorite vise. I use it all the time. Let's move on to the next cabinet. Okay, this cabinet's another yard sale find. I think I paid $5 for it. It's homemade. It's sturdy, but it's not the highest quality piece of equipment I ever bought. But it works out well because it has this huge door on it, which allows me to store all sorts of things. I've got teak oil and wipe-on polyurethane, all my waxes, and there's a collection of stains from Minwax that I really don't use anymore, but I have them. So if I do a lower-end project, I'll use those stains on it rather than the stuff I buy from Mohawk. And I pretty much use the top of this bench, as just storage for equipment. And if you look up here, we have my Rikon belt and disc sander that I use frequently. Right to the right of that is a Drill Doctor. Again, a yard sale find on the Rikon, $15. A yard sale find on the Drill Doctor, $5 or $10. And then I actually went out and bought that Work Sharp sharpener, and that works wonderfully for chisels and plane irons. It's absolutely spectacular. I love it. And then to the left of the Rikon is a container full of blocks of wood, which I use for all sorts of stuff, for clamping, for spacers, for all sorts of things. And again, yard sale, most of it. But if you look at, for example, look at this piece right here. All right, it's a piece of maple. Here, it's a piece of maple board, right? This is actually a play block. I bought a set of blocks from a lady for, I think, $5. And look at that, that's just rock solid maple, and I can use that for 1,000 things in the shop, so that's another good idea for you all. And then to the left of that is a metal toolbox, and that just contains extra hand tools that I have I really don't use, and I get them out of my toolbox and I kind of store them. I have another affinity for old metal toolboxes and then hand tools. I've never been able to throw a hand tool out. Okay, continuing in that corner, we have this pretty large wheeled rack of bins, and inside there is all sorts of hardware that I've collected over the years. Yard sale finds, leftovers from projects. This is going back to the time I was 20. And then the bottom two drawers are just chock full of miscellaneous stuff. I mean, I'll never sort it, but it's there if I need it. And then I'm going to show you some of the more interesting drawers here. What I do is I keep blocks of old wood. This is walnut. This is mahogany. And over here is all my old veneer that I save for different repairs. This is a beautiful flame mahogany. That way if I need it, and I often am in there, I have it and I know where to get it. And then the big surprise, well not the big surprise, the big news in the shop is right here. This is my new air compressor. This is a Quincy QT54 5 horsepower, 60 gallon, 2-stage air compressor. It'll pump out 15.7 cubic feet per minute at 90 psi. It stores the air at 150 psi. It's more air than I will ever need for restorations. But I do plan on getting an air sander sometime down the road, and between that and maybe a blast cabinet, is when it will come in handy. I was able to run a 220 volt circuit to it. I created the cord, I created the plug, and then I was able to bolt. I bolted this to the floor, and then I installed this Milton Made in USA. It's all metal regulator and water filtration system. And the way I plumb this is, and I did it real quickly, is I basically just used 3/8 air hose. Again, I bought a 50 or 100 feet of it at a yard sale for $5, and ran it around under the cabinets, and I ran it into the air piping here in the garage, in the shop. When I bought this place, it had already been piped for compressed air, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4 drops in the shop. I really only use the one, but that's where it's going into. And then there's that little tiny water separator that I had used in the past. I just plumbed it in. As I use this more and more, if I decide to plumb this with hard pipe into the system, I will. But for what I'm doing now, this is going to be fine. And then up top here we have the air filters and oil that came with the compressor. There's Spike, he's the shop mascot. And yard equipment. Unfortunately, I have to keep my yard equipment in here as well. Okay, let's keep going. And over in this corner, I store my hydraulic table, as well as whatever dollies I have in the shop at the time. And I put them there so I can get around it. I can open the door to the storage container there, and if I have to, I just pull it out and it rolls it right outside. Gives me some more room. Next to the air compressor, I have my grinder, and that's on a stand. I was able to find that cast iron stand at another yard sale. I think I paid $15 for it. The grinder was a gift from an elderly gentleman who used to be a neighbor of mine, and I treasure it because of that. I thought a lot of him, and I consider myself quite blessed to have that grinder. Behind there is a little window air conditioner that I use in the summertime because it does get hot in Georgia. And if I can get the garage door closed on a real hot day, I can get the shop down into the 70s, and it helps me and it helps whatever I'm working on. And any of you that watch the channel have seen this bench, as disgusting as it looks right now, 1,000 times. This is on wheels, and the story behind this is kind of funny. I was at an auction for a business that was going out, and they had a loft with a spiral staircase. So the auctioneer called this out. It was still upstairs in the loft, and I had seen it during the preview, and he says, the bench upstairs, you have to remove it. And nobody wanted to bid on it, so like an idiot I bid $5 and I got it. And I went upstairs to try to take it apart because it couldn't come down the spiral stairs in one piece, and it had been glued together when it was assembled. So it took me about an hour to break it apart far enough that I could get it down those stairs. It was a lot of work, but it is handy as heck. It has storage on both sides, as you can see. And as you know, I mounted this wood vise on here. So that's flush with this, so I have another vise here. And I usually just cover it with a moving blanket. But what's the best about this is it's only 30 inches tall, so I can flip furniture on its back, like a dresser or a chest of drawers on its back on this bench, work on it comfortably, and then if I have to move it, it's on wheels and I just push it. Everything in this shop, pretty much, with the exception of the traditional workbench and anything that's bolted down, is on wheels for that reason. So that's the story on the main bench that we use in the shop. Let's keep going. And this little Craftsman work table is another $10 yard sale pickup that this does not have wheels on it. But on top of this, I have all sorts of hardware, mostly screws, washers, machine bolts, some stuff from the older days, machine screws, and selections of wood screws. There's a whole bucket of brass screws here, all sorts of things, hardware related. And then inside the drawers, that drawer right there has most of the stuff that I use for doing fills in wood. It's got my waxes, my hard fills, my burn-in sticks, my burn-in knives, things like that. So that's all together. And let's look at the next drawer. And the next drawer is veneering supplies and dowels and plugs. So that's all together there. Underneath, from the right to the left, on the right is an artist's kit that I bought at a yard sale for $5. It's full of very expensive brushes and paints and coloring things that I use. On top of it is a box of colored artist pencils. I paid $1 for that at a yard sale. That right there is a box full of, there's a couple of hold down clamps in there, but in general it's antique hardware that I've saved. I've got 2 big rolls of 4/0 steel wool. That's how I buy it. It's cheaper that way. And then underneath that is a Kennedy toolbox that I picked up for $5. Kennedy's a pretty high quality toolbox, and like I said, I'm a little nutty about old metal toolboxes, so that's there. That's actually empty. And then to the left of that is some stain and dye that I use. And then on top of the bench, that box right there is rags that I'm using. One of the things that's easy to get out of control in the shop are the rags that are laying around. So as long as they're not oily or dirty, they go in that box there so I can grab them. And then I've got a container for oily and dirty ones that I'll show you here in a minute. Then there's a little blazer torch that I use for all sorts of stuff, a candle that I'll use sometimes. I'll light it and I'll use it to heat the tips of my knives with if I need. Some Laxolve, which is what I use when I use powdered colors. And then the other thing that's easy to lose track of is sandpaper. So what I do is when I use sandpaper, I'll take the used sandpaper, if it's still good, and throw it in that box. And that keeps me from using my good paper when I need to just do a little touch-up somewhere. That's a pretty good tip for saving money. And then if you look to the left, you'll start to see clamps, or I just have clamps everywhere because I've got so many of them and I've run out of room for them. And if you start to look up, you can see clamps galore along that wall and this wall and hanging in the corner. I got a lot of them, but I use them. So And like Norm says, you can never have enough clamps, right? And just to the left of that Craftsman table is a rack of what's called Gorilla shelving. I bought this at Sam's Club. I think it was $100. And this is where I store most of my bigger tools, my router and scroll saw and sanders and things. And then on this shelf I keep my lacquers and my epoxy. And down on the bottom there's another metal toolbox, surprise, surprise, but there's hardware fixtures, and then on the right, in the bottom right corner is like a motorcycle jack and a car jack and jack stands and things for working on automobiles. In the corner there is where I keep my stripper and my stripping supplies to keep them out of the way. And also I often will buy lacquer thinner, 5 gallons at a time. That's what's in that black container right there. And that's where I store that. Also in this back corner I keep a bucket full of different sizes of dowels, which I use all the time for replacing stretchers, for plugging holes or whatever. And then this big cardboard barrel is where I throw wood scraps in that I want to keep. There's oak, maple, walnut, all sorts of stuff, pieces of plywood, things that I need. I really wish I could get rid of that because it does take up some space, but it's on wheels. And I just deal with it. But anybody that's in the shop knows you've got to have scrap wood laying around if you're going to get any projects done. And in the summertime, when you all hear that roar, it's because this gigantic floor fan that I have, I mounted this on wheels as well. I paid $10 from this for a friend of mine who had an auction house. It wasn't working. I brought it home. I replaced the start capacitor, which I think cost me, I don't know, $6 or $12 on Amazon, and it works fine. And I actually have another one stored away that I bought at a yard sale for 20 bucks, and that's a Dayton. So when this one finally dies, I'll have a backup. And then on this cabinet behind it, that's full of sandpaper and sanding supplies. I keep cleaning supplies on here. And the other thing that I do to keep costs down is whenever I make toners and I don't use them all, I just put them in jars and label them, and I'm able to use them on lower end projects if I need. In the cabinet above is mostly spray paint, where I keep my oxalic acid and some other things. And next to it is my main tool chest, which is where I obviously keep my tools. To the left of that, on the bottom, is a Craftsman unit, and that has the remainders of my C-clamps in it, and a bunch of tools, automotive tools, air ratchets, that kind of thing. Stuff that I really don't use for restoration, but I do use when I work on my cars. And then on top of that is the only Snap-on box I have. That was a yard sale find for 10 bucks. And I've got basically just drills and drill bits in that. And then on the top of it is a plastic box that has a homeowner's level set of drill bits and various drill type fixtures, screwdrivers, Torx bits, stuff like that. It's junk, but it'll get you out of a jam if you don't have that particular piece. That was a yard sale find. I think I paid $5 for that. Up above it is a shelf where I keep my filters for my lacquer. There's also painter's plastic. There's a Delta tenoning jig up there for my saw, and then there's a drill press jig up there as well. And then there's a tool belt there, and then down here in the corner is a big barrel that's on wheels, and there's some welding supplies in there, and my old Ryobi planer, which I finally got working correctly. It took a little bit of adjustment, but it's working great. And I told you a little earlier about how I handle rags. I was at a yard sale and I was able to find this for just a couple of dollars. The people had used it, and good for them, at parties. They put beer and ice in it. But what it is, it's a OSHA certified container for oily rags. So when I get done with using a rag, if I don't throw it out, I let it air out first, and then it goes in here, and then I wash them so I can continually recycle them and use them without throwing away rags, because I use a lot of rags. And there's my old Delta bandsaw. That's probably from the 1940s. I think that's when they used this emblem. I paid up for this one. I wanted it. A kid had it, and he was selling it. He said it was his grandfather's. But I love it. And there's my Delta drill press with the Palmgren vise on it. There's my Delta table saw with a very large crosscut sled on it that I use frequently. And now when you first walk in the shop, you'll see these cabinets. All of these were picked up at different times for next to nothing at yard sales or auctions. This cabinet here is mostly for my spray equipment and finishing things. I've got brushes in here. I've got little tiny tools, things that I need at hand when I'm in the finishing stage. I've got some gloves. I've got some cleaning supplies. My imprint kit is in here. I've got a small Awada gun that I use very infrequently. I have some 3M products here for very, very high gloss polishing. Down here I have my Makita buffer that you've seen me use and the polishing compound I use it. And then this is where I keep my spray guns and my orbital sander. This box here is all color. This is where I keep my powdered colors, my colored pens, my brush graining markers, and additional artist brushes, which I collect at yard sales because they're ridiculously expensive at a store. Repair markers, I don't use those very often. And then rolls of Tootsie Roll epoxy, which I do use quite frequently. And this box here was an old box I had before I got into restorations quite so much. There's more automotive stuff and home improvement stuff. There's staplers here. I don't use them. I've got an air stapler. And just miscellaneous stuff, not of any great interest, except maybe this drawer, which is full of straps that I use as band clamps. And in this drawer here is engineer's measuring tools, like this, and then socket sets, so I don't have to wrestle with a big toolbox to get my sockets out. And I think that's about it. And finally, let's go through the cabinets. Up on the top shelf there, I got my pneumatic brad nailer, stapler, and finish gun with staples and supplies there. This middle row is all aerosol sprays, WD-40, PB Blaster. I've got my 5-minute epoxy in here. I use these plastic cups to mix my epoxy in. I get them off Amazon. And then on the bottom shelf here, I've got body filler. These little pipettes are great when you're using super glue and other things that you've got to get in. Also good for squirting glue into tight areas. I've got a head magnifier that I use. It's the box is upside down. Mineral oil that I use on some shellac oak finishes. These are little bamboo skewers. I run them through the bandsaw. I use them for mixing epoxy. I've got my acid brushes back here and various adhesives that I keep in this cabinet. And next door to it, on the bottom shelf are all my prepared toners, as well as shellac and spray polyurethane, spray lacquers. And the next shelf is actually electrical repair stuff for when I do home electrical stuff, as is the second shelf up there. Like I say, before I got into the restorations, most of my work was home improvement. We had a Victorian home back in New York, and we did an awful lot of work on it. And this cabinet is, well, there's some drywall equipment up there, but it's mostly glazes, stains, grain filler, and then different dye stains that I use. You've seen me use most of these somewhere along the line. The next cabinet, more drywall equipment, I got a soldering iron here, a stainless steel polishing kit, more miscellaneous hardware, some storage boxes. You know, this guy's been in the shop for quite some time. We went on a family trip. I had some family come down and visit us. We went to a range and we had to buy our targets, and this guy was left over, and instead of throwing him out, I hung him up. And he's just been here. Uncle Hugs, I guess is his name, but I don't know why he's still here. I just haven't taken him down. And then in the next cabinet here is mostly lawn care equipment, oils, and things like that. Up on the next shelf is a whole collection of planes that I've restored. Again, I pick them up for next to nothing and then restore them, and then I store them until I die, I guess. Then there's some axle grease up there on my router bits, and that's for lifting heavy furniture. It goes, it's kind of like a harness and a strap deal. It's pretty cool for lifting heavy things. All the cabinets in this shop and then in my garage I bought in one load when we first moved down to Atlanta from a doctor's office that was remodeling. I paid $100 for an entire trailer full of these cabinets, these white melamine cabinets. They've been a blessing. Okay, and we've got this one here, which I told you was full of spray paints, and there's all manuals for the different equipment I have here, and masks and spray paint. There's oxalic acid up there, and then some miscellaneous stuff. And then in this final cabinet here is mostly sanding supplies. It's kind of a mess in here, but I've got sandpaper, cork blocks, sanding discs, and then down here bulk sandpaper that I bought on closeout for next to nothing, gloves. And this is where I keep my foam brushes and chip brushes and things. And under this moving blanket here is my jointer, and behind it is a Colombian vise that I restored that's on a stand. I paid I think $12 for the vise end stand, and it's great. I know somebody's going to ask how loud the compressor is, so let me fire it up for you. It's probably about half as loud as the oilless that I had, and other than that first second or two when the motor kicks over, I don't think it's bad at all. And so far it's been a remarkable addition to the shop. So thanks for joining me on the journey of Lost Mountain Restoration YouTube channel. I truly appreciate anybody that subscribed or commented or watched, and again, the only thing I'm hoping for is that I can share some knowledge and help some people along. As a community of viewers, I would truly appreciate if you would comment and let me know what it is you'd like to see on the channel. I hope you enjoyed the shop tour. I think the message that I'm really trying to send to everybody is not how cheap I am, but that you can get set up relatively inexpensively if you take your time and you know what you're doing. You don't have to run out and buy everything brand new and be in debt for the rest of your life. Just take your time, get what you need, and when it does come time to buy something, if you're serious about your shop, buy good quality stuff. Don't buy junk. I would rather have a used Foley bell saw sander than a brand new cheap Chinese piece of junk from Harbor Freight that's not going to last. And the Harbor Freight one would cost 25 times what I paid for that. The compressor, way cool. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm excited about having that. So let me show you what's on tap here in the shop next, and then we'll say goodbye. And this is what's up next. I've got a mid-century modern bedroom set, a gentleman's cabinet, and a 6-foot triple dresser that I picked up this weekend, or this week actually, for $125. And although they look great from a distance, they are in tough shape. There's nothing really structurally wrong with them, but the finish is just completely gone. So they're going to have to be fully stripped and fully restored. But they should be
fairly valuable when we're done. But we'll make a video in some manner of that restoration for you.
So listen, from our shop just outside Kennesaw, from our shop, now that you've seen the whole thing, from our shop just outside Kennesaw here in North Georgia. Thanks for watching. Best regards. See you next video. And hey, please, if there's something that you want to see, put it down in the comments and I'll do my best to get it on. I appreciate each and every one of you. We're up to 500 subscribers and I hope the channel continues to grow. Thanks again. See you next video. Bye.